Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of WIN TV, Washington Informer News. I'm your host, Denise Rollard Barnes, publisher of the Washington Informer newspaper. And I'm so glad to be with you today and glad that you're here with us. And I just want to say to you, I hope that you have picked up your copy of this edition of the Washington Informer News. It's available on newsstands as of yesterday. And so if you want to pick up a copy, please feel free to do so. If you want to know where you can get a copy of the Washington Informer News, call us here at 202-561-4100. Again, that's 202-561-4100. And you can also get a copy of Washington Informer News at www.washingtoninformernews.com. And while you're there, I would really like for you to consider signing up for a subscription to the newspaper. You know, we can send this to your email box every week. It hits your mailbox sometimes before it'll hit the streets. And you can find out all the late breaking news that we've covered here in the Informer. You know, the times have been difficult, but we want to thank all of you all who've been supporting this broadcast, supporting the newspaper, and we're continuing to produce both and so much more, despite all that we're going through right now. But again, I want to ask you to subscribe because it certainly does help us and to help our hardworking journalists and photographers that are out there trying to keep our community informed on the latest news that impacts them. We have a really full show today, and I'm so glad that you're here to be a part of that because we're going to be talking to Melissa Lavinson. And she is the Senior Vice President of Government and External Affairs at PEPCO. And, you know, the big story was an election story, and it still is. It's about climate change. And so we want to talk about what our local utility company is doing to make our environment a safer place to live and how we as residents can participate in that process. We also have DC's newest at-large city council member, Christina Henderson. She came through an election last year with, I think there were 24 candidates in the DC at-large election, and she came out victorious. So we're looking forward to talking to her and getting some ideas about more about what's on her agenda as she joins a city council that is now predominantly female in the District of Columbia. And last but not least, in honor of Veterans Day, we're going to bring on military veteran and photojournalist Michael McCoy. Michael is a phenomenal photographer, but he's going to talk a little bit about how photography has been a way for him to deal with the stresses and other issues that he has had to deal with since coming home from battle. He's fought been engaged, I think it was Iran and Iraq. And, you know, a lot of our military people came back facing a lot of stresses. But in Michael's case, he is talking about how he's been able to address his PTSD by the use of the art of photography. So we're looking forward to talking to him more about that. So in the news, the local news, you know, yesterday, DC Mayor Muriel Bowser dedicated 441 4th Street, that's known as 1 Judiciary Square, as the Marion S. Barry Building to honor and preserve the former District of Columbia mayor for his contributions. And so we've got a statue now in front of the Wilson Building and a building named after the mayor. I know there was some former mayor, I know there was some attempt or idea of possibly naming the building, the former Reeves building at 14th and U Street after Barry, but I think that this was something I think the city was excited about. And I know that there were a lot of folks out there to join in that celebration. For those of you all who are living in the state of Maryland, the moratorium on utility shutoffs will be lifted on November 15. A state prohibition on residential disconnections began in March in response to the coronavirus pandemic. And so that means that for those of you all who are late in paying your utility bills or were unable to get your utility bills paid, the moratorium will lift on the 15th. That is, unless, based upon what's happening with this virus and the fact that it's still very difficult for people to find work or to get employment, that the governor or the state legislature decides to extend that. And so we'll be following that and letting you know what decisions were made. And if not, we've talked about it before, and we may get a word from our representative from PEPCO, who might have a little bit of a recommendation on what you can do if you are behind in your utility bills. We're not here to talk about that, but we certainly want to provide that information to you if we can. The mayor of Hyattsville, 38-year-old Candace Hollingsworth, has resigned her office effective at the end of December. Hollingsworth has been mayor for the past 6 years and is the youngest and first African-American mayor in the 134-year history of Hyattsville. She will be developing the new political party called Our Black Party. And so Washington Informer reporter Serafina Wright wrote in an October news story that this new party was launched by hip-hop mogul Sean Combs, who we know as Diddy. So Hollingsworth says the party was created to improve the quality of life for Black people in the United States. And so we'll see how that goes. We hope, we know that this election brought into question, it was certainly an election that divided between Republicans and Democrats towards the end. But I know that there's a cry for third parties. The question is, how effective can a third party be here in the United States, where in other countries there's so many different parties, but we usually have the two. And of course, in the District of Columbia, we have our statehood and our Green Party. So we will follow what Hollingsworth will be doing. Thank you, Chevy. We'll be following what she'll be doing and how this party goes, and Sean Diddy. Okay. And it's interesting. Isn't it interesting how, so many, we're going to talk about that later on at another date, but how these, the hip hop community, the music community, rappers, I don't know what the best term is because I'm not a fan of some of these terms, but in describing the music and the people that are involved, but they certainly are involved in the political process this year, visiting the White House, shaking hands with the president, having concerts to get people to come out and vote. And it didn't start in this election. Of course, it goes way back. And maybe we'll look at that, the role of the arts community in the political process. So we will follow up on that. And of course, we know that the Affordable Care Act is known as ACA, or what some folks call Obamacare, is a safety net for people who work at small companies that can't really afford or offer insurance to some of their employees, and for people who make too much money to qualify for Medicaid. So on Tuesday, while we were out voting, the Supreme Court heard arguments in a Republican challenge to the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. We won't know their decision probably until late spring. And one of the hurdles we know with that act was the fact that if there was a penalty, if you did not get insurance, you had to pay the government on your tax return this penalty. Well, that penalty has gone away. President Trump is taking credit for that, but we know it came through Congress to get rid of that penalty. And so we don't know what some of the other flaws are with the Affordable Care Act. President Trump has said he wanted to get rid of it, didn't have another plan. And others have said, no doubt, the bill needs to be fixed. And so we'll see what some of those other remedies are, especially when it comes to prescription drugs. Sadly, the total number of deaths in the United States due to coronavirus have climbed to 242,954. And that was as the time we put the script together. We don't know how many folks we've lost, let's say in the last few hours. But there are over 10 million cases of COVID-19 in the United States. And I think we are now #1 in the world when it comes to this pandemic. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. But maybe we are going to finally get a message on things that we need to do make ourselves safe. Besides what we've been saying over and over and over again, wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. We've said all those things. And there's some people that just don't believe it. I don't know if you have, but I've talked to people all over the country who said, you know, there's states like, just talked to somebody whose family's in Kansas. Those people are not wearing masks. They didn't believe it. And now they're going to funerals. Well, the sad thing about it is due to COVID, they can't go to funerals of their loved ones. And so this is serious, folks. This is very serious. And I think the mayor has made it clear here in the District of Columbia. I think we've done a good job. But we still need to know that in places like Maryland, that they're going to reimpose restrictions and expand testing in response to this virus at levels similar to what we saw back in the spring. And while we're continuing with our daily lives, we know that Thanksgiving and Christmas, these holidays that are coming up, are not going to be the same. We're going to, as I said before, have to wear those masks, practice social distancing, cancel those big dinners. I know somebody's sitting in their kitchen right now saying hallelujah, but you know, we're going to have some virtual Thanksgiving dinners, and that can be a lot of fun. So we want to hear about some of those virtual dinners, but stay safe and remember that during the holiday season. Last week, in the Informer, of course, we came out on Thursday. So we were still, like the rest of the nation, trying to figure out what was going to be the result of last Tuesday's election. And we heard it on Friday that President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris were the presumptive you know, their votes still have to be confirmed, or there's a word for it that's not coming to me. But right now, the nation is celebrating the fact that we have new leaders in office. And so we're happy to have a relationship with, of course, Kamala Harris's alma mater and mine too, Howard University, the students there who have an excellent student journalism program, who have provided us with a video that we want to share with you right now.
America has announced a new president-elect, Democrat Joe Biden. After an election day that turned into an election week and an unprecedented election season has finally come to an end.
We're proving again what we've proved for 244 years in this country. Democracy works.
While President Trump was able to successfully defend traditionally Republican battleground states like Florida, Texas, and Ohio, those were simply not enough to get him to 270. Defiant and disputing the results, he took to Twitter to make baseless accusations that the election was being stolen from him. Due to concerns regarding COVID-19, 100 million Americans took part in early voting. While leading in most swing states, after claiming Pennsylvania, Biden had won the race. He was also victorious in states that President Trump won in 2016, like Michigan and Wisconsin.
Joe Biden has broken the record for the most number of votes cast for any presidential candidate, surpassing 70 million votes and shattering the record set by Barack Obama in 2008. He is making history as the oldest candidate elected as president. His running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, is making history as the first woman, African American, and South Asian vice president.
We did it, Joe.
Democrats remain in the majority in the House, while control in the Senate hangs in the balance, with an eye on a few races. Despite a more polarized Congress, President-elect Joe Biden aims to unify America as a nation. For News Vision, I'm Samantha Cheney.
Not only am I excited about that story, but I'm excited about Samantha Cheney. That just lets us know that our student journalists are on a roll, and don't be surprised if you see her again here at the Washington Informer. But that's where we are right now with this national election. You know, there's a big Senate race down there in Georgia, and depending on how that goes, we might end up with two Democratic senators. I say we, the nation may end up with two Democratic senators from Georgia, and maybe another African American. So There's still a lot at stake, but the one thing that we can say that's positive about this election is that folks came out and voted. And so give yourself a big high five, like, hey, if you did go, if you went to the polls, give yourself a high five and say, and this, what we've been able to see, I mean, with them having to go through in Georgia and to count every single vote by hand. If votes don't count, if voting doesn't count, I don't know what else we can do to prove it. So for those who did go out and vote, congratulations. And we'll see what happens. There's a lot of stories to tell with the transition. Will there be an inauguration? What's it going to look like? And who the new president and vice president will be bringing into the fold. And it's important for us as district residents because they will also become our new neighbors. So having said that, tomorrow, for those who may be in need, tomorrow, November the 15th, Martha's Table, located over here at 2375 Elvins Road in Southeast DC, will be hosting a winter coat giveaway while supplies last. And so they're asking folks, one, to donate coats, lightly used coats, as well as those who need them. You can come there tomorrow between 2 and 5 p.m. at Martha's Table, 2375 Elvins Road Southeast, and pick up a coat. If you plan on going downtown tomorrow, please plan your route. We just talked about the Million Man March. Well, coming to Washington is the Million MAGA March. And you've heard it, the Million MAGA March. Followers of President Trump and so many other groups, and they say white nationalist groups as well, but folks that are coming to Washington, D.C. To rally at Freedom's Plaza. They'll be at other places, I understand, all across the country holding rallies. And while we may ignore what they're saying, I think it's always wise to listen and to find out what is their vision for America, even though their president will not be here to make sure that it occurs. But hey, everybody, you listen, you don't know what you hear. So I'm not suggesting that we go down there. I'm just letting you know that there will be a lot going on in downtown Washington tomorrow with this Million MAGA March, and you just might want to hear. Lastly, sad news. You all seen the photograph, and we are assuming that it's the picture with Kamala Harris following a shadow or silhouette of a little girl. Well, that little girl is Ruby Bridges. And Ruby Bridges is a civil rights activist who started at a very young age because her mother sent her to an all-white elementary school in New Orleans. Well, Ruby Bridges lost her mother, Lucille Bridges, who died at 86 years old. And so, when we think about Ruby Bridges and all the people that were involved in the civil rights movement, the only thing I can really think about was the strength of her mother, to say that she thought she was doing the right thing to provide a better education for her child, but had to walk her child to school while racists were trying to attack her daughter. She didn't know what it was going to be like. If she could just get her from home to school, where National Guardsmen were even there to protect her, that's a bold step for a mother to take and to try to make life better for the next generation, as we all mothers try to do for our children. So we send our prayers out to the Bridges family. We thank Lucille Bridges for being a strong Black woman and for bringing her daughter up to be sort of her own strong Black activist for Black people in her own way. So I'll just say to you now, for up-to-date news in your community, please remember to subscribe to the Washington Informer, www.washingtoninformer.com. Join us every week here. If this is your first time, welcome. We are broadcast live every Friday from noon to 1, and we try to pick up the latest news in the Informer and anything else that's going on that we think you need to know. So you can follow us on Twitter at Washington Informer, and follow us on Facebook at Washington Informer, and any other social media platforms. We're also on LinkedIn and others. So looking forward to you all becoming friends and fans and followers and having conversations on social media, because we definitely want to make sure that we are part of your everyday activities. So coming next, a conversation on climate change with Melissa Lavinson of PEPCO.
We have a strong commitment to preserving and protecting the environment in the communities that we serve. The Sustainable Communities Grant Program is one way that we know we can help do that. Our Sustainable Communities Grant Program supports environmental stewardship, conservation, and climate resilience programs across the communities we serve. Projects include preservation of open space, creation of recreational areas, and projects to adapt to a changing climate. We're committed to stepping up and stepping out on important issues, whether it be helping to combat the climate crisis or taking action to preserve the natural environment. We know that healthy environments equal healthy communities.
Melissa Lavinson is the Senior Vice President of Government and External Affairs for PEPCO Holdings. And prior to joining PEPCO, she worked at PG&E, where she served as the Vice President of Federal Affairs and Chief Sustainability Officer. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
So I'm excited to have this conversation about climate change, because we know that, it was almost a bad word for a while, even though before it was, we were celebrating some of the achievements that we were making. But from just from a basic community standpoint, what are some of the signs of climate change that some of our local viewers may be observing?
Well, thanks for that question. And you're right, it is an incredibly important issue, and it is something that we're all observing. We're living it today. Climate change isn't something that's in the future, it's happening now. And I think the way that we're seeing it, particularly in this area, is we're seeing more days over 90 degrees in the summertime and more days in a row over 90 degrees. We're seeing many more severe storms in terms of torrential rains as well as high winds. And we're also seeing in parts of our area, while we have the flooding and heavy rains on one side, in some areas we're seeing actually extended periods of drought. And so that cycle of having heavy rains and no rain, it really creates that unfortunate opportunity for flooding. And that's a really big challenge to lots of our communities.
We know with storms and rains and tornadoes and all of that, we know the kind of damage that those situations can create. But environmentally speaking, if you can answer this question, we see, I guess, photos about, the fish in the sea and what have you. Talk about impact. What is the impact on, let's say, a family that lives on Martin Luther King Avenue?
No, that's really important, because while I think we talk a lot about the impacts of global climate change, really understanding what it means in our daily lives is super important, because it does impact all of us. So just as we're talking about some of the impacts we have here locally, so if you think about a world in which we're going to have higher temperatures, which means we might have more days of intense heat waves over time, higher humidity. For a family, that could mean higher energy costs. If it's a family or someone that lives in an area that's prone to flooding and we have more torrential rains, that means potentially more flooding at your home. It makes it more challenging for people to get to work, either when there's higher heat, when there's torrential rains. And you really think about it going forward, that has the global impact can have an impact on food supplies going forward. And so we could see over time higher costs for food, as well as impacts on air quality. When there are more days where the temperatures get above 90 degrees and high humidity, it does impact our air quality, and that has a public health impact. So while people talk about global climate change, and you might see pictures of forest fires in California or melting ice caps in Greenland, we're seeing it every day in our daily lives here, and it does have an impact on our everyday lives.
And when we look at what we as consumers, or just humans, do to contribute to this climate change, I guess that's where the area of subject of greenhouse gases comes up. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, and so what causes climate change is something called greenhouse gases, and it contributes to what's known as the greenhouse effect. And so the greenhouse effect at its core, it's essentially the way in which heat's trapped close to the Earth's atmosphere by these gases. And these gases include things like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. And we generate these gases by burning fossil fuels, which are things like coal and natural gas to generate electricity, or petroleum in our cars in terms of gasoline. And we also generate greenhouse gases from agricultural processes, fertilizer use, and other activities. And so while a lot of these are naturally occurring and through the natural cycle of things, human activity over the past 100 and 150 years has really accelerated the release of these gases into the atmosphere, and basically creating almost like a blanket across around the Earth, which traps in heat and heats the Earth's surface and eventually the oceans. And that's what really is causing what we know as climate change from the greenhouse effect.
And like individuals, I think Pepco is probably maybe leading, because if your company is to provide heat and electricity to consumers, and one way you did it contributed, I guess, in the past to these greenhouse gases, and now your Pepco is looking at ways of contributing to a cleaner environment. And so talk about some of those things that you all have had to do over the last, I know you've been at it for a while, but over the last few years to change the way you're doing business.
Sure, absolutely, and absolutely right. We at Pepco Exelon really believe that climate climate change is real, and we really have to do our part to help combat the climate crisis. And so some of the things that we've done as a company, so as Exelon made a commitment a long time ago to transition away from fossil fuel in terms of its generation fleet and go to a clean, carbon-free generation fleet, and has actually emits the lowest amount of greenhouse gases of any major power producer in the country. For Pepco and Pepco Holdings, we actually don't own any power plants. We're a company that provides electricity to our customers in this region, and we do it in accordance with our states and jurisdictions. And so, if you think about Washington D.C., the District of Columbia, the district has been really leading on climate change in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and building resilience. They have some of the most forward-leaning goals of any jurisdiction in the country. Has a goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, and so if you think about that over the next 25 years, and being resilient. And so from our perspective at Pepco, we really know that we have a role to play in that. We have an obligation to help our communities and customers reduce their greenhouse gas footprint, and we have an obligation to reduce our own. So we've taken a hard look at what we can do in terms of reducing the greenhouse gas footprint of our own operations, so our buildings and our own electricity use, as well as our fleet, what we can do to help our customers and enable them to reduce their carbon footprint in terms of saving energy, using cleaner energy, going solar, and then what we can do to help the broader community both mitigate climate change, but also adapt to a changing climate, including strategic tree planting, trying to build resilience in our communities, and really helping the district to transition to an electrified transportation system. So lots of activities, lots of action, and we know that we have a role to play, and are committed to playing that role, and committed to really taking steps to combat climate change.
I think the message is getting out there, and I think that from what I can see, like you said, lots of trees have been planted all across the city for many years, and so that's one thing that's great about DC. We are a city of trees. And then I think it appears as though we're finding more bike lanes. People don't like the bike lanes, but we're seeing more bicycles and other types of vehicles now besides cars, because we're a small city, so people are adopting other means of transportation. And you talked about solar, and that's going up
Absolutely.
on rooftops all across the district.
Absolutely.
So with all of that, one would think that, okay, if we can depend on the sun to provide electricity, and Pepco supports us in that, does that decrease our bill? Will we end up paying less, but having really enough electricity to manage our households? There's some questions I'm sure people still have about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And solar is a fantastic technology, and the district has in place a great program to provide solar energy to all customers. So there's options for folks to put solar on the rooftops and to generate enough for your own household. And folks have the opportunity to sign up for what's called community solar, including through a program called Solar for All, which actually can provide free solar electricity to income eligible customers across the district. So the district's really done a fantastic job of advancing that. And the role that we play in that is helping to interconnect solar to the broader distribution system, and making sure that we're investing in our system so that it's resilient and so that it can accommodate all these new decentralized generation sources coming onto our system. I think, taking a step back, an important thing to note is, the system as it exists today was built to accommodate electricity kind of coming from big power plants through lines and then to people's homes. And today, with new technologies like solar, like storage, et cetera, we're able to really to break that old paradigm and to really generate electricity locally. But what that means is that we need to make the investments in the power grid to make it smarter, stronger, and cleaner so that we can accommodate all this new solar coming on. And so that's what the role we see as Pepco playing, is to really allow folks to understand where the best place is to site solar, to make the investments to accommodate solar, and to really streamline those processes so that people can get their solar interconnected to the system as quickly as possible to help customers take advantage of it and drive down their energy bills.
One thing and we're kind of coming to an end, but I wanted to say, Melissa, when you talk about this, I'm using the word conversion, but as we move into these different areas, I hear jobs. I hear opportunities. I hear because eventually everything's going to change eventually, and so that means that there's opportunities for people to learn more about solar, or about climate change and how to be a part of this movement. And so what would you tell people to do if they want to know more about what Pepco's doing, and as that relates to some of your goals moving forward?
Sure. So actually, we're going to be coming out later next week, and people can go to our website probably Thursday, Friday of next week, because what we've done is really to take a step back and to look at what actions that we're taking today and what actions we can commit to taking tomorrow to help enable this transition to a low or zero carbon future for the District of Columbia. And so we're really excited about that. And so it's going to lay out a series of actions that people can understand what we're doing as a company. And hopefully then other companies can take a look at that as a model and say, oh, I can do the same thing, whether it be increasing the efficiency of our buildings, transitioning the energy sources that we're using to power our buildings, or transforming our fleet to an electric fleet. We're going to be highlighting actions that our customers can take through programs and energy solutions that allow them to use energy more efficiently, or go solar, or actually convert their own vehicle to an electric vehicle, and what they can do to help manage the costs around that. And kind of showing what we can do as a broader community, how we can all work together to build resilience, as well as how we can work together to educate one another about actions we can take to, again, save energy and save money at the process. One thing that we did in conjunction with the District of Columbia and this summer, and a host of other coalition partners, was to actually launch something called Reduce Energy Use DC. It was an educational campaign, as well as a campaign that showed folks how to take action, how you in your own life can take action to both combat climate change, but save energy and save money at the same time. And there's really easy things folks can do. And so what we really wanted to do was put all that together in terms of showing what we're doing today, what we hope to do tomorrow, and how others can join in the fight. And so stay tuned for that. We'll be launching that later next week. But we're excited, and we look forward to the collaboration, the partnership with folks going forward.
Well, so do I. And we want to definitely follow it, because the more, like you said, join the fight together to save our environment, to save our climate, to clean it up, and to make the future a better place for our children. So thank you, Melissa, for being with us and for sharing what PEPCO's doing. We deeply appreciate your time.
Absolutely. And if I could just comment, because you did have the question on the moratoriums in Maryland, for folks that need energy assistance, they should reach out to PEPCO as soon as possible. You can go to pepco.com/help. And you can understand all the options that are available. Our number one goal is to keep people connected. We want people to power on together. And so there are lots of energy assistance options available, both in terms of financial assistance, as well as programs that are out there to help you manage your bills. So I really encourage folks to go to pepco.com/help. And if you need help, please go there today, because we are here to help. We will work with all customers.
I'm so glad you did that, because this evening I would have been saying, oh my goodness, I forgot to ask her that question. So thanks for sharing that with our viewers, because I know that there are folks out there that will need help. And I'm glad PEPCO's there to serve. So enjoy your weekend, stay safe, and thanks for joining us.
You too, and thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All righty. I am muted. So yeah, I want to thank Melissa Lavinson for joining us and for sharing that information. Climate change is a big issue that impacts our community, whether we know it or not. And so it's good to be able to have these conversations with folks who can tell us what we can do to make our own homes and our lives. Particularly, we spend a lot of time in homes. We might want to go around and see how much stuff we have plugged in. That's one thing we can do to address climate change. I need to do some unplugging this weekend. But anyway, moving on, we're excited to bring on at large our newly elected, although we have to wait for inauguration, wait for her to get, sworn in, our newly elected at large council member, Christina Henderson. And how are you, Christina? There you are.
I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I think the last time I saw you was at a candidates forum.
Yes.
And, I know that you did a great job. You got an endorsement, and most importantly, you got the vote. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about the campaign first. This was your first campaign. And, you have an impressive background. So it's not that like you haven't been involved in other folks' campaigns, but still, just for you running in the District of Columbia, tell me what that experience was like.
Well, Denise, most people don't think that the first time that they run for office will be during a global pandemic. And so that definitely caused a little bit of difficulty in March, where everything shut down. We initially thought it would be a shutdown for about 2 weeks. And then here we are months later and still unable to do that. And so we had to basically retool our plan in terms of how we get an opportunity to talk to voters and how we get our message to voters, especially because, one, there were so many people who were in the race, but two, because there were also a number of people in the race who had run before and who had served before. So, I think how it went down, but I was outspent, outraised, out endorsed. But but I feel like, we put in the work. I did over 98 virtual meet and greets and candidate forums. We sent out over 511,000 pieces of mail to voters across the district. We did, contact list canvassing, lit drops to over 21,000 doors across the district. We did text messaging, we did phone calls. I think we did a lot to try to get our message out there, and the voters responded.
Fantastic. And, you've been in politics or maybe in the legislature because you worked for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. You were on the staff. You were the deputy chief of staff for former council member. Well, he's still council member, but will be leaving the council, decided not to run for re-election, council member at large, David Grosso. And I'm looking here. I mean, you've done quite a bit, but I'm just kind of curious about this campaign itself. I know when you set out to run, you probably had an agenda. Mm-hmm. And then you got out there and you started talking to people. Was there anything that you heard that sort of made you say, oh, I thought people were concerned about this, but, they're also concerned about that. What did you hear among DC voters?
Yeah. So, honestly, I launched my campaign in November of 2019 and was talking about some of the very similar issues: childcare, affordable housing, public safety challenges that we were facing in the district, how to increase access to healthcare. And I would say that COVID-19 only amplified that in terms of the concerns that folks had, right? So there's definitely a lot of people, a lot of voters who are concerned about affordable housing in the district, and also concerned in terms of the looming eviction crisis that may be pending here in the next few months because of the number of people we've had out of work. But there's also been an amplified conversation around how do we help small businesses in the district. So, when I launched my campaign, the District of Columbia had a surplus. We were talking about how to spend extra millions of dollars, and now we're having to talk about perhaps declining revenue, but also how do we protect our businesses to ensure that they're here for when we're able to get back to, I'm not going to say normal times, but better times in terms of people being able to gather, eat in restaurants, all of those different things.
I hate to be, some might consider this sexist, but I don't care, because I know that when it comes to doing more with less, women know how to do that.
It's
They say we're big spenders, but we know how to stretch a penny.
Yes.
And you all are going to be forced, because with the majority female city council now, you're going to be forced to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, and having to make cuts in certain areas because of the situation the city's in right now, and may be in for at least another year or so. Mm-hmm. So, what's the thing that keeps you awake at night as it relates to going forward now on the council?
I think the thing for me is it's twofold. So one, I'm really deeply concerned about our young people in this time. I know that our young people have been going through a pretty traumatic period. For some of our kids, a period of isolation, not having the connectivity with your classmates and with your teachers in a real way, especially for our youngest students who in pre-K3, pre-K4, kindergarten, first grade, who a lot of your learning in those early years is around socialization, but also learning through play. And so how are they surviving in this moment by doing it in a distance learning scenario? And so one of the things that does keep me up at night is, how are we going to make up for this learning loss? How can the council support our LEAs and the work that they're going to have to do going forward to help in terms of reading and all of these various pieces? So that is something that keeps me up at night, because I'm concerned about ensuring we're not losing a generation of kids because of something that was due to no fault of their own. The second thing I would say is around, how do you find the balance? Because I deeply believe that even in the economic challenges that we're facing, we have to take care of our people. We have to continue to provide the critical services that are necessary. But I also recognize that, we can't go in the red in order to do so. So really thinking about how to evaluate the situation in the best way to find a balance, to ensure we're providing critical services for our folks, but also being fiscally responsible as a city.
Have you, how would you describe your relationship with the mayor?
I think it's a good relationship. I actually just saw her for I'm not going to call it a ribbon cutting, but a new playground in my neighborhood just opened up. And so I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to work with the administration. One of the things that I talked about on the campaign is, yes, there are a number of new priorities and initiatives I want to work on. But I'm also like a government head. So I like to get back to doing some really strong oversight. Getting some transparency, accountability, and questions that a lot of voters have been raising, and also feeling like the council has sort of, shirked on its responsibility around oversight. I'm of the belief that oversight doesn't always need to be adversarial. So we can have tough conversations, and I can ask for information on the record, but it doesn't need to be personal, in my opinion. And so that's the style that I want to bring to the council, and that's what I plan to do in the next year.
As a freshman, you probably won't get a committee, but when you get one, what would be that committee that you'd want to chair?
Oh man, I mean, I think that the natural thing for me would be education, because I was the committee director for that committee for 2 years, so I've had experience in doing that. But I also have interest in health. For me, one of the reasons that I decided to run was honestly around my experience dealing with the healthcare system, and in particular, maternal health with my own pregnancy, and how it is impacting Black and brown women in this city, and not feeling like we had enough council members who were really speaking to this issue in a real way. It was kind of illuminated too when I was on the campaign trail, and I would explain to people, like, we don't have a hospital east of North Capitol Street that has labor and delivery in DC. And when you put it in those terms, people are like, oh, yeah. Half the city, yes, half the city does not have an option for that. And what is that doing to our families, and what is that doing to women in particular? And so I have an interest in health, all of these different things. I'm really excited to get to work. Someone asked, like, oh, are you going to lobby Chairman Mendelson to change his rule? He's pretty steadfast in his rule, or has been since he's been chairman, around freshmen not getting committees. But I want to take that opportunity to, one, sit on as many committees as possible, but really dig in on some of these issues that I deeply care about, from education to healthcare to transportation, housing, and anything in between.
I didn't introduce you with your background, but I'll let you do that. I mean, tell folks who just were asleep during the election, or maybe favored another candidate for whatever reason, and they don't know who Christina Henderson is. Who is Christina Henderson?
Well, so I'm the daughter of an Army veteran and a retired New York City bus driver. And my parents always instilled in my siblings and I the value of hard work, collective action, and fighting for what you believe in. And that's what I've tried to do for my entire career. I've worked on political campaigns to help get some good people elected to office. I've worked for a couple of school systems, including DC public schools. I've advised and worked with U.S. senators, which, as you mentioned, is what I do in my day job. And for 5 years, I had the pleasure and honor of serving residents in the district, first at DCPS and then for 4 years at the DC Council. So I was Councilmember David Grosso's first legislative director. And then when he became chair of the Committee on Education, I served as the committee director for 2 years before leaving for my current work. So my background is based in policy, but it's also based in service. And that is my lifetime work, my calling, and my purpose. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to get back to serving residents of the district.
So I don't know if by you not saying it, that you're not a native Washingtonian, because, DC folks are like, well, is she from DC? Are you a native? Because we always start off with that. And I went to DC. Tell us a little bit about that background.
Yeah, so I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but my mom joined the military when I was young. So I've moved around quite a bit, a lot of southern states. I went to college in South Carolina. I went to grad school in New Jersey. And I actually think that it's given me a really interesting perspective. But DC is the first place that I got to choose as my home. I met my husband here. We've had our daughter here. We bought our first home here. I live in Petworth in Ward 4, and so DC is my home. So I won't be able to claim a native Washingtonian, but my daughter is a native Washingtonian. And I'm hoping one day that I will be embraced as a DC in.
That's a good one. No, I mean, we're very, this is still a southern town, and we are
Yeah.
still very welcoming to folks. And some people think I'm like a second, third. I'm a first generation Washingtonian. So, it starts somewhere. So
Yes.
welcome to DC.
Well,
And
I
so,
would say this. Can I just add? I mean,
sure.
I feel like even when I worked at the council, and even before that, one of the things I have loved about DC always is its rich history. And I felt, working at the council and at DCPS in particular, that it was a responsibility for me to become a student of DC's history, because I feel like that additional context helps policymakers. It helps you understand why a neighborhood might not be so open to an idea that you have because, 10, 15, 20 years ago, some other council member also had the same idea that didn't come to fruition. It explains some of the tensions. It explains, some of the deep rooted pieces around distrust that we have. And so I think it's important for any person who is going to do policy in the district, you have to get to know the history. You have to get to know the context, because it makes you better in terms of being able to see the change that you want.
Smart. That's all I can say is smart. I think that's great. And it empowers the people in the community if have a sense of their history and what they've come through.
Mhm.
Really smart. Let me also ask, one of the big issues that's being, that cities and states are, are facing all across the country is this call to defund police.
Mhm.
Where did you fall on that issue?
Yeah, so I think that it's important for us as a city to move from an over-reliance on law enforcement to handle some of the challenges that we face in the district. So for me, I feel like over a long period of time, we have put things on the police department that shouldn't be on the police department. For instance, why do we call 911 when someone is having a mental health crisis, as opposed to calling the Department of Behavioral Health, which has a 24/7 crisis response team? A lot of it is around resources. And so I think that we need to think really critically around the values that we say as a city, where we want mental health to be a public health issue. Well, then it shouldn't be resolved in our criminal justice system. I do think that there are a number of reforms that are needed. The council obviously moved very quickly on that bill earlier this year, and I'm sure they'll make that permanent. But I think that there are some other changes that need to be had. I talk to young people in this city, or even older, folks, residents who've lived here for a long time. Their distrust with the police didn't start when they were adults. A lot of it started when they were kids, in terms of how police were interacting with them in their teenage years, and not just MPD. Metro Transit Police also has an outsized influence in this conversation, but I feel like they never get mentioned in terms of what changes need to happen there. And so I think we need some deeper reforms. We need to look more at the data more critically, but also put some standards in place, especially as it relates to law enforcement interaction with juveniles, especially at schools.
So your current boss, Chuck Schumer, up there on the Hill, are you going to leave him? Are you going to be able to continue to work there, or has he given you your farewell party yet?
He hasn't. He hasn't given me the farewell party, but there is no way that I can continue to serve the great people of the state of New York at the same time that I'm serving the folks of the District of Columbia. So I'll be leaving in mid-December, hopefully after we pass a budget and don't shut down the federal government in a couple of weeks here. So I'll be making that transition and serving as a council member full time.
I appreciate this time, Councilmember-elect, at-large Councilmember-elect Christina Henderson.
It's still so weird to hear.
Yeah, there'll be some days when you'll say, I'm not. But, right now you can claim it and be proud of it. We're proud of you. And look forward to having more conversations with you. You always have a place here at WIN TV if there's some issues that you think we need to be addressing. And you just gave me one, which related to that 24-hour hotline. I mean, why don't people call that number? We need to find out why. Yeah. So, and then if they do, what will happen? So we'll talk about that some more. I appreciate your time and all that you've shared. Get some rest. And, we'll see you hope it may be a virtual inauguration, but we'll be watching.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Denise. Have a
All
good
righty.
weekend.
You too. Thank you. I'm just talking. I don't know. Did you all hear anything I said? Because I've just been talking away. But anyway, like I said, I was really glad to have Christina with us, and we're going to run a series called Know Your DC Government. We hope to have that coming up soon. And I talked about the fact that my dad wrote a little pamphlet, I might get that, back in 1964 called Know Your DC Government. And the reason he did that was to let the majority Black or African American community in the District of Columbia see who was actually running the government that controlled their lives, which at that time was a predominantly white-led city government, and DC was still pretty much segregated. Not long after that came the Home Rule movement, and Marion Barry and so many others came and got involved in that movement. And then, of course, for other reasons, people left. But these were jobs that were eventually filled by African Americans. The point is, we need to know who's running our district government, and we need to feel comfortable and knowing that if we have a problem, although we have to go through 311 to get questions answered, but we know who does what and why. So we're going to start with the members of the DC City Council, and we're so glad. Last week we had Mayor Bowser with us. We're glad to have had Councilmember-elect Christina Henderson this week. And so we'll be having more members of the council joining us to talk about the issues that impact the community. So if you have any questions, feel free to email us at win-tv at washingtoninformer.com. Again, email it up. There it is right there on the screen, win-tv at washingtoninformer.com. And when that person comes, we want to be able to ask those questions of them. So lastly, I want to thank everybody. I was going to sign off, but it looks like we've got Michael here, who we want to, come on. Where's Michael? Michael, we lost you.
Hey, can you see me or hear me?
We can see you and we can hear you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know you're in your car, but hopefully you're not driving.
Nah, I just pulled over.
All right. Well, let me start off by saying, first of all, as a veteran, we want to thank you for your service. And I know Veterans Day was on Wednesday. And yes, you're doing the right thing. I think we're pretty much socially distant, right?
Yeah. No, I'm just leaving Capitol Hill and like touching all this stuff and getting in the car in these elevators.
So what did you just cover?
Today, Speaker Pelosi did a presser about the presidency, and then I was also staking out the new members of Congress. Got something I gotta move. I was parked in like an illegal zone. Someone trying to find me a parking spot like a little up the block. Oh, here we go. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And we want to see if you could turn your camera sideways, turn your phone sideways. Yeah. But don't let the guy give you a ticket. We just finished talking about the police. There you go. Fantastic. So You're a photographer and a phenomenal one. I'm so glad that we were able to utilize some of your services for a period of time. But tell folks who are some of the organizations that you've shot for.
Right now I currently contribute a lot to the New York Times, Washington Post, Getty Images, Reuters News Service, um, occasionally Time Magazine, and the list goes on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's why we feel honored to be among the group. But how did you get into photography?
Photography kind of got into me. As a kid growing up, my dad had a film camera in the car, and I would play around with the camera and not really know what I was doing. But as you get older, you start meeting girls, and you kind of put the camera down. But it wasn't until I got to Iraq that I just started picking the camera back up. So I was taking selfies in Iraq before selfies were like a thing. So I would always send pictures back on my mom just to let her know it was okay. But she'll be like, "Well, why does Santa have a gun?" I'm just like, "Well, that's just a pride." And one thing led to another. I would just start taking pictures from my friends so they can send home to their parents. But after my second tour of a duty in Iraq, my mom passed away, and you realize that you can't catch up on all of the parties, the birthdays, or whatever it is. So why not just begin to document these moments?
I think that's powerful. And what was your duty? What did you do as a service person? What part of the service, and what was your job?
In the Army, I was a human resource specialist. So everyone thinks you're sitting behind a desk, but as a male, you're generally assigned to the infantry or any other type of combined arms or combat related unit, because those units are all male. But nowadays they're starting to integrate. So you'll have females in the infantry and the special forces. But back when I was serving, all of those units were male dominated. So you pretty much go where the needs in the Army.
And did you volunteer?
I did. Well, not to go to Iraq, and I volunteered to serve.
And what motivated you to join the Army?
As a kid, that was always the dream of mine. Back when my mom was pregnant with my sister, I wanted to stay with my grandma in Pennsylvania, and she lived around the corner from a National Guard base. And my grandma would tell me every day when those trucks come by, she said, "You will find a way to sneak out the house." And she didn't even know how I can get the door open. And I would just run the street, and the guys were like, "Let me get in the truck." And they was like, "Since that moment, you were hooked."
Wow, amazing. And how long did you serve?
I did 5 years.
Looking back, if you were Michael 5 years before then, do you think, knowing where you are or what you know now, do you think you would have volunteered still?
That's a tough question. I mean, in this climate, I mean, there's a chance, but I mean, that's very tough to answer. And the reason I say that, because when we look at these police and these military forces, coming to our streets, that right there can change anyone's mind and their perspective of how they're viewed.
Right. So you were fortunately and honored, I think. It was an honor for me to watch you do an interview at the National Press Club recently, talking about how photography has been sort of a calming force or, sort of medicine for the PTSD that you suffered by being in Iraq. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. For me, you'll have service members, they'll walk around with service dogs, or some people may use medical marijuana, or they'll have different therapeutics to help, with anxiety and depression. But for me, it's my camera. So as long as I have a camera in my hand, not say I don't go through stuff, but it allows me to manage better.
A lot of people have, we don't have cameras, but a lot of people have these things, right? And we're going around, we're taking pictures. And so there's something different. And that's what I think makes you so great, because what I can do with this still does, it may be okay, but it doesn't compare to what you do with a camera. So when you look at subjects, when you look at things that you're going to shoot, I mean, what are you looking for?
I mean, I look for honor and dignity. I mean, every photograph I make it with honor and dignity. Whether I'm on Black Lives Matter Plaza, whether I'm in West Baltimore, Ward 7, Ward 8 photographing, or I could be in the sticks photographing a white supremacist rally. I shoot everything with honor and dignity. Even though I may not necessarily agree, But as a journalist, you got to have journalistic integrity.
What do you think was one of your toughest assignments?
Oh man, I would say Baltimore. Covering the uprising for Freddie Gray, which I covered for you guys, which y'all gave me the front page. But like for me, growing up like 10 blocks from Freddie Gray, and that hit me hard. Because you had these white journalists that would come in, and you would also have some black journalists who may not have come up in those areas. So for them, there was no attachment. Like the Western Police Station, that was down the street from my brother's house in the projects, and there was a carryout across the street. I mean, all of that. And then they go to Pennsylvania Avenue, North Pennsylvania Avenue, and see that the CVS is burned down. Like that hits hard.
Yeah. And how far has your camera taken you?
My camera's taking me just about a little bit of everywhere.
I
Um,
mean,
my last travel assignment that I took, prior to COVID was down to Selma for the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. And I had the opportunity to photograph John Lewis for the last time. And at that time, I didn't know that would be my last time photographing him. But I'm just fortunate, and then I thank God that I had the opportunity to create that memory.
have you been able to, we thought we were going to have some of your photos for this show, but we may do that at another time. But have you done an exhibit?
I have. I've done exhibitions at Photoville. I did a private show here over in Potomac, and I did a few things for the this past year's BT Awards.
When I pulled up my cell phone, the point I was really going to make was that I can take 1,000 pictures with this, and I don't get $1. I don't even get a penny. You make money.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you're I'm not asking you how much or anything like that, but have you found photography to be lucrative? Has it been able to support you?
I mean, it has its days. I mean, like you were talking about earlier, how women can work and stretch. I mean, as a photojournalist, I mean, you got to learn to stretch. And if you grow up poor and not having everything, I mean, it ain't nothing. I mean, you just can't spend all your money. I mean, some seasons are better than others. Like right now, things are looking a little better, especially for like photographers of color. Because at one time, black and brown photographers, they weren't getting those looks. I mean, I was getting work, but I'm like not consistent. Like at sometimes, I'm overly worked. I mean, a friend of mine, we always make the joke about like, hey, now I know how it feels to be a white photographer.
Amazing. Yeah, because you're getting so much,
Yeah.
but that's good. That's wonderful. And so what are you focusing on now?
Right now, I'm just taking it day by day, just doing a lot of general news stories, breaking news. I would like to get back to like some of my personal veterans work, but with COVID, I don't want to put anyone at risk.
Mm-hmm. Um, we did just celebrate or commemorate Veterans Day. And, what would you say to, you're still a fairly young man, you have young people that, are still serving, coming out. I mean, what do you say to them about life now on the civilian side and what they should or should be doing, should or should not be doing, or what they could be doing, or any words of advice?
Like to the brothers and sisters that are still serving, keep doing what you're doing, pay attention, take advantage of all the educational opportunities that you can. If you have a relaxed job and downtime, go to school full time. Save your money, invest, learn, get certifications. One thing I learned when I was in the military, I had a buddy of mine, he was from Chicago, and he was a nurse. And I worked as an HR specialist, but we were detailed to an Iraqi jail. And one thing he said was, it doesn't matter what you do in the military as an enlisted. You can manage an inventory of $10 million. You can supervise 30 people, but if you're not an officer, it doesn't mean anything. Like for example, he was a medic, and he would be, I guess, equivalent to like maybe an LPN. but his superior, who's an officer, is a certified doctor. So, take advantage of all the certifications, take advantage of the education, because once you get out, it's a world out there. And it ain't gonna wait for nobody.
I'm glad you said men and women, because I think I talked about men, but they're right. There are lots of women who are serving in the military, and we certainly want to thank them, all of you all, for your service and for the contributions you're continuing to make in our community. So I want to thank you for taking this time and for keeping us, recording history, because that's the way I see what you do. I mean, if what do we call capture those moments?
Yep.
And to know that those moments are being captured by Michael McCoy is wonderful. And we want to see so much more. So we'll be following you and following your byline wherever it appears.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, you have a great day. I'll let you get out of that car and move on before somebody pulls you over again.
Yeah, I ain't trying to get pulled over. I just want to thank you for having me, Denise. I want to thank you for believing in me, early in my photojournalistic career. Because back then, some of these white editors, they don't know who you are. They don't want to know who you are. And it's just nobody believes.
Well, the proof was in the pudding. When I saw your work, and I think that goes back to the advice that you were given before. There's like I said, I can do this all day long. I can even pick up a $10,000 camera, but you got to know. That's why I asked you, what do you look for? Because and I could see it in your work that you had not only the eye and the mind, but you also had the heart for your subjects. And so that's what impressed me the most about working with you. So I'm glad you're doing good stuff, and keep doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
And if anybody wants to follow me, my Instagram handle is Michael A. McCoy Photography. Twitter, I think it's Mike A. McCoy Photo, which I don't really use a lot. And my website is www.michaelamccoyphotography.com. Please do not forget the A, because a lot of people do.
All right. Well, with that, we won't forget the A.
And
Wonderful.
if anybody has any questions out there, if you have a love or a passion for photography, feel free to shoot me a message. I'm here to help.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
All right. Have a good one. Oh boy, truly inspirational. So we've gone over time, but I think that was worth it. And I hope that you all enjoyed our conversation with the folks that we've had here today. I want to thank Pepco. We are beginning to get sponsors for our program now. So I do want to thank Pepco for its sponsorship for this and some more shows coming forward. If you're interested in wanting to know how to sponsor Win TV, please send an email. Send your email to that email address I gave you earlier, win-tv@washingtoninformer.com. We want to know what you want to talk about and what you might want to sell. So having said that, you all have a wonderful weekend. I must say I will not be here next week. We're going to have Lindawe Valakazi, who's going to be our host. I'm looking so much to seeing her. And I know she'll be able to keep this show going, along with, of course, our dynamic producer, Chevy Lassiter. So with that, continue to read the Washington Informer. Have a great weekend. So long.